Finxter, this is Anqi. Today I'm going to guide you through my article about os.walk on Finxter.com. So os.walk is a powerful Python function to generate the file names in a directory tree. In this video, I will first introduce the syntax and the I/O relationship of this function so that you know how to use it. After that, we will look at 3 top questions about os.walk listed here with real usage examples. By the way, this video assumes you already know some basic Python syntax, like how to use a for loop in Python and how to open a file in Python. If not, check out the Finxter.com for other brilliant articles about them. And I will try to make sure you can follow up my video and article as a newcomer to Python as well. Without further ado, let's dive into os.walk. This is the syntax of os.walk. It has one must-have parameter, top, and 3 optional parameters, since you will probably just use the first 2 parameters, top and top down. I will only cover these 2 parameters in detail in this video. And if you like, you can always refer to my article for the other 2 parameters, 1 arrow and follow links. So let's look at the first parameter, top. This first parameter, top, you can pass it to a directory path string. It is used as the root of a directory tree. For example, this is an example directory tree that we will use throughout our entire video. By the way, the difference between a directory and a file is that a directory can contain many files, like the above directory D contains 4.txt and 5.txt. So here we have our root directory learn os.walk in this example directory tree. That's probably an intuition for what is like the root directory for a directory tree. So let's get back to our second parameter, top down. Top down is a parameter accepts a Boolean value. You can give it you can set it to be true or false. When you set it to be true, os.walk will walk from the top of a directory tree, like from here, this top of this directory tree, to the bottom of a directory tree. Otherwise, if you set it to be false, you will just walk from the bottom of the directory tree to the top of the directory tree. Wait, I know it might be confusing at first because it's kind of abstract, but later in our example, I will show you exactly how to use the top-down parameter based on a vivid visualization and an example. As for the output, os.walk will yield a 3-element tuple 1 by 1. And one tuple contains a path string of a directory in the directory tree. For example, D or A or B or itself as the root directory in the directory tree. And that's our first element in this tuple. And the second element in this tuple is gonna be a list of subdirectory names. For example, in the directory A, we have only one subdirectory. Under it is only D, right? So if it's gonna be the path of A, then the list here will be only contains one element D because there's only one subdirectory under the directory A. And as for the third element in this tuple, it's gonna be a list of subfile names. So back to our example. Here we have, under A, we have only one file, which is 3.txt file. So here is gonna be 3.txt. So that's basically what it will output of what the os.walk will yield one by one. So that's the syntax and overall usage of os.walk. And let's understand the top-down parameter through an example based on the example directory tree. As I just mentioned, if you set top-down parameter to be true, it will just walk from the top of a directory tree to the bottom of directory tree like this. And do a real code example to see what will happen if we set the top-down parameter to be true and to see what the output will be like. So here, let's look at the live set of this video. We can see there's a code here, right? So let's just focus on this right now. And in the first line, we initialize a new variable, a directory path, and we assign it with the path string of this root directory in our example directory tree. And the second part of this code is going to be a definition of a function called take a walk. And please stick with me because this function will just be around in this video later. So you have to understand this function right now. And this function takes two parameters. The first parameter is called file path, which takes in a path string of a directory or a file. And the second parameter is called top-down flag, which is used to flag whether we set the top-down parameter in os.walk to be true or false. And here, since we are trying to figure out what it's going to be like if we set it to be true, so so here in our first code example, we set it to be true here. And to make it even clearer in our output, so we print out each time whether we set the top-down flag to be true or false. And next to it is gonna be a for loop. A for loop is, let's take a look at here. Here is our friend os.walk, and os.walk takes in the first parameter is the path string that will pass to the take a walk parameter, and the second parameter we pass to os.walk is the top-down parameter. We pass it just the top-down flag that we have already passed it to the take a walk function, and after that os.walk will yield a three-element tuple one by one, and each element in this three-element tuple will be assigned to path name, subdir names, subfile names, and in this under the for loop, we have a chunk to print out each element in the three-element output of os.walk one by one. They are path name, subdir names, subfile names. And we print out this segmentation part to help us understand what is the end of one loop and what is the start of the other loop. And at the end of this function, we print out what a walk is just for fun. And so after this function definition, we code this function here, and we just pass it with this directory path. This variable we set already here in our first line, which is the path string of our root directory in our example directory tree. So that's the explanation of this code. I hope you understand how it works and why we write in this way so that you can be replicate later in our other examples. And let's see what the output would be like in this code. Oh, so if we run this code, we will get this output here. And in the first line, it tells us, okay, we set this top-down parameter here to be true. And so, and the rest of this is gonna be the output of the for loop here. And we can see if we set this top-down parameter to be true, it starts from the root directory, and from the top to the bottom, it will search in this way. And so first, it print out the path name. Here is the root path name. Is the path string of the root directory. And as for subdir names, which is the subdirectory, is a list of the subdirectory under the root directory, which are A, B, C, and they are A, B, C here, which is correctly represented. And as for the third element in this three-element output tuple is sub-file names, which is a list of the sub-files under this root directory, which is 1.txt and 2.txt, and they are here represented very well. And I think you can now pretty much understand what is the output looks like and how it works. And let's take another look at the next for loop example. And after walk through this root directory, it will just go down to this as a new path name here. And the path name will print out the path string of this subdirectory in the directory tree. And of course, the second element in this tuple is gonna be the subdirectory, a list of a subdirectory under this path name is gonna be D. Only one element because there's only one subdirectory under this A directory. So yeah, it's gonna be a list with one element. And as for the third element in this output tuple is gonna be the sub-file names, which is a list of files under the path name A. So since there's only one element here as a file, so here the third element output will be only a list with one element, which is 3.txt. And it will just go from here to here, right? And to here, here, and to C, and the last one, C. It will just take this walk to each directory in the example directory tree. So that's basically how os.walk work when we set the top-down parameter to be true. Now let's take a look at another scenario. If we set the top-down to be false, what will be like? What the os.walk will work under this scenario. So basically, it will start from here, D, and then it will just go all over from here to here, to here, to here, and finally the root here. It will just start from the very bottom and to the top. Let's see how it looks like in a code. So it's pretty much like the code that I have explained when we set the top-down parameter to be true. The only difference is that here we set the default of the top-down flag to be false. So if we don't pass any parameter, if we don't pass any value to the top-down flag here, then this function will just takes the default value, which is false, to the top-down flag. And the top-down flag will just assign a value to the top-down parameter in os.walk to be false. So here, this is the only difference from the previous code. So no more explanations, I think, needed in here. You just have to know that we are under the scenario that we set this top-down parameter to be false. And let's see what the output will look like. All right, we got output like this. And we set the top-down flag to be false. And yes, we start from D here in this example directory tree. And since under this directory D, we don't have any blue item, right? We don't have a blue item says is a directory. So the dir names list is gonna be an empty list because there's no directory under directory D. But we do have 2 files under directory D. So yes, we have a 2-element list of this sub file names output. So that's our first output in this for loop. And let's take a look at our second output. Here's A. And I think probably, yeah, A. So since A has one subdirectory, which is D, so in this subdir names list, it will output a list with only D. And since there's only one element here as a file, so in the sub file names list, it will only contain one element, 3.txt as well. And after we look through A, we will look through B, we will look through C, and finally we will look at the root directory of learn os.walk. So simply put, it will just walk from the bottom to the top if we set the top-down parameter to be false. So now I hope you understand how to use os.walk and the top-down parameter. That's our first part of this video. Well, of course, you might wonder what will happen if we pass a file's file path, maybe a Python module file path string. Like here we have this string represents a file path string of a .py file to the os.walk. This is exactly a point I was thinking when I started using this method. The simple answer is that it will not execute your codes under the for loop. Why is that? Let's take an example of this code, okay? So here, if you want to code like this, you will get the output only here, like this. There's nothing in between the first print. It shows us we set the top-down flag to be false, and the end of this function say what a walk. There's nothing here, which means that we don't execute the code here. Why is that? Because there are either subdir names nor subfile names in a single file. I think you can better understand in our example directory tree. For example, if we pass the file path string of this 2.txt to os.walk here, then os.walk will look at what is under 2.txt file. There's nothing, right? There's no directory or there's no files under this one single file, so it will not just output anything here. So if you want a better understand, it is just like you write a code, like you assign an empty list to a variable L, and you write a for loop like for I in L, and you print something like hi, and you run this code, and you will still get nothing. You don't get hi. You can try it yourself because there's no element in an empty list, right? There's no element in an empty list, so it will not print. It would just not execute anything under this for loop. It's the same as here because we don't have anything, any subdirs, any subfile names under a single file. So if you pass a file's file path to os.walk, it will just simply not work. It will not simply, it will not throw you an error, but it just will not execute anything under this for loop. So next time you use os.walk, you probably just want to pass it. Here you want to pass a directory path, okay? So that's our second part of this video. The Google query to os.walk is os.walk versus os os.listdir. So if you ever wonder what's the difference between these two methods, let's take a look at it. So the simple answer is that it's just as the top Google response says. The os.listdir method returns a list of every file and folder in a directory. And the os.walk function method, or I should say, returns a list of every file in an entire directory tree. Well, if you feel a little bit uncertain about this simple question, we can then use code examples to help us understand better. We will stick to our same example directory tree as in our example here. So let's take a look at the code. So first we have to import OS module, and we assign this. We assign the path string of learn os.walk here to the variable of directory path, and we just use os.listdir this method, and we pass this variable here to the listdir. We try to list all subfolders and files under our root directory in our example directory tree. That's what this code does. And let's see the output. All right, we got the output like this. And the output tells us, all right, under learn os.walk, we have files like 1.txt, 2.txt, and we have folder like A, B, and C. That's what the output of the os.listdir means. It means like only the first layer of this entire directory tree is included, or I should say that the os.listdir cares only about what is directly in the root directory tree or in the file path that you pass it as the parameter. Instead of searching through the entire directory tree like we see before in the os.walk example. So in summary, if you want to get a list of all file names or all file names and directory names within a directory path, go with the os.listdir method and you will get something like this. And if you want to iterate over an entire directory tree, you should probably consider os.walk method. Like you don't only want the first layer of this directory tree, but you want the whole everything in one big directory tree. You should probably consider os.walk instead. Now I hope you understand when to use os.listdir and when to use os.walk. And this is our third part of this video. Now let's take a look at our last part of this video. Our last question with os.walk is about how to literally iterate over the entire directory tree. Concretely, we have some small goals for our next example, and our next example will also use our example directory tree, so don't worry. So our small goals are, first, we want to iterate over all files within a directory tree. And our second goal is to iterate over all directories within a directory tree. And so let's take a look at our first goal. We want to iterate over all files within a directory tree. This can be achieved by a nested for loop in Python. And we have another brilliant article on Finxter.com about nested for loop. If you are not familiar with this concept, please feel free to check that out. And let's take a look at the code first. So by the way, what we are going to do here is like, I thought about the potential application of iterating over all files within a directory tree. I think the potential application could be some sanity checks or number counts for all files within one folder. And I think it would be fun if we can stick with usage rather than just tell you how to use a nested for loop to realize this iterating over all files within a directory tree. So let's count the number of .txt files within one folder. The code for this application is here. As you can see, we first import OS module and we assign the path string of our root directory to this variable, a directory path, and we set our total file number count equals to 0 at first, and then we use os.walk to walk through our root directory. And since we don't pass the top-down parameter here, the top-down parameter its default value is true, by the way, and it will output our free element tuple one by one. And this is our first for loop, right? And under here we have a nested for loop here. And since we want to iterate over all files within a directory tree, we choose to iterate over the sub file names here so that we can iterate over all files within a directory tree. And since we want to count the number of .txt file within the directory tree, so we use an if statement to test if the subfiles, if the name ends with .txt. If value is to be true, then we add the number of the total .txt file, the count. We add one more to it, and at the end of this code, we print out the number of .txt file. And if you run this code, you will get an output 7, which is correct because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 .txt file in this entire directory tree. We can also iterate over all directories within a directory tree. This can also be achieved by a nested for loop in Python. The potential application of iterating over all directories within a directory tree could also be some sanity checks or number counts for all directories within one folder. For our example, let's check if all directories contains init.py file and like this, and add an empty init.py file if not. The init.py file, by the way, signifies whether the entire directory is a Python package or not. The code for our application, or for example, is here. And as you can see, first we import OS module and we assign the path string of our root directory of our example directory tree to this variable directory path. And we use os.walk to walk through the root directory of our example directory tree. Since we want to iterate over all directories, so we choose to add a nested for loop to iterate over all subdir names here. And since our example wants to know if each directory has init.py file or not, so we need to create the init file path first. And we use os.path.join to join the path name, subdir name, and the init.py file name so that we get an init file path. And then we use an if statement to check if the init file path exists or not. If it's not exists, then we create a new empty init file path. And it's just a print statement to tell us that, oh, all right, we will create a new empty init file here. And then we just use this with open statement to create a new empty init file. And that's overall our whole code here to realize the sanity checks for init.py file. So as you can see, we use this code to realize our application. And before our execution, our directory tree under the take a walk function mentioned before looks like this. It's like the before, and we don't have any init .py file under each directory. We don't have any init.py file here, right? And after the execution, we get the output of the take a walk function, and we can see now we have init.py file here. So hooray, we successfully iterate every directory within a directory tree and complete the init.py sanity check. In summary, you can use os.walk recursively traverse every file or directory within a directory tree through a nested for loop. That's it for our os.walk article. We learned about its syntax, I/O relationship, and difference between os.walk and os.listdir. We also worked on real usage examples ranging from changing the search direction through top-down parameter, .txt file number count, and init.py sanity check. Hope you enjoy all this and happy coding. Until next time, bye.